back before your eyes. Stop bright nor dark, but in your sight. The people come from locks and chains, they see you now.
Hey, Composer Gloves here, and today we're going to be talking about time signatures. So time signatures are how you sort of decide what gets the beat. And in the piano roll, this is a way more difficult concept than it ever was in written music. In written music, it's simply the number of beats in a measure, which, as we discussed, this is a measure, the number of beats, so how many of these lines there are, these gray lines, and what quantity gets the beat. So, for example, is there a gray line every 2 of these smaller lines, or is there a gray line every 4, which we have a gray line every 4. This length right here is equivalent to a quarter note, or 1/4. So it's 1/4 of a measure. Now, in FL, it gets really weird because you can manipulate this relationship. We go to options, just go to, what is it? Which one is it? Project. You can put beats per bar. So we need to really quick talk about the idea more of a time signature before we really get into this. So we know that this length right here is equivalent to 1 beat, right? And in sheet music, this is a very malleable concept. You could change it so that these 2 notes right here, these 2 little sections represent 1 beat. As we talked about with tempo and with the measure being broken up into sort of these fractional pieces, changing this relationship changes the way that the computer will interpret what we write in our piano roll. And this can make it really intuitive to work with it. It can make it very easy to write certain rhythms and not other rhythms and do all these kind of cool things. So we could say in 1 bar, so the length of 1 measure is referred to often as a bar. Musicians will say like, oh, 3 bars, that's equivalent to 3 measures. As measures is just a longer word, I guess. They want to be more concise in how they rehearse. So they'll say, hey, play 4 bars of this or a 4-bar riff or whatever. And people know what that means. No one says play a 4-measure riff. Like that just doesn't exist. So beats per bar is how many beats are in that bar. So this 1 bar, we could change it to be like 7. And now, as you can see, our thing just moved and we added 3 beats to this measure. And now we can also say steps per beat. Now, this is where it deviates from music theory. So you could say like, or not music theory, from written music quite heavily. You could say there are going to be 2 steps per beat. And we get this subdivision of 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, as opposed to before it was 4. And so this is weird. This is weird stuff. Like at this point, I'm going to move over to Pro Tools to show you the rest. But once you have a fundamental understanding of this, you can use it. And now, a lot of you are probably wondering, why would I want to use this? And I even saw some things that said, hey, I want to work in 4/4. And I like classical musicians, they would have the actual reason for this. But I see a lot of EDM producers and stuff saying it's completely stupid to write a 6/4 measure and then a 4/4 measure and then a 6/4 measure. Just do everything in 1/4 and change the snap settings. And if you don't understand what I'm talking about right now, don't worry about it. But that's simply not a good argument because of the way the rhythms will roll out. So each time signature has sort of an associated rhythm that goes with it. Like 1, 2, like 4/4 would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So that's sort of like an Indian chant where 3/4 is like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And this is really great. And it allows us to go about writing specific riffs and specific things a certain way much easier. Now, once you get used to working in FL enough, you can pretty much write whatever rhythm you want. But these time signatures, when you get into more advanced theory and composition, become super important to you. They're specifically more important to the performer, which is why FL, you can fudge it with the snap settings, but it's once you've gotten used to it, it's way more intuitive to sort of work with that method. And so I find that argument like lame and dumb and not a good argument, but it's like whatever. People work with what they know, and they probably never even leave 4/4. And that's probably the people who are making those arguments are like probably go to like 3/4 or 4/4. They don't ever jump from 4/4 to 6/8 4/4, or they don't ever work with 7/8. Anyways, I digress from that kind of crazy talk. Let's come over here and let's make your understanding of this easier. So this is Pro Tools. And the cool thing about Pro Tools is you can set up a meter. So we have 4/4 and 3/4. So it's not intuitive how this is set up. This is just a difficult concept. A lot of you guys who are making popular music probably won't ever have to worry about this too much. Probably most of you will be working with 4/4. So one of the rules about 4/4 is also called common time. It is so common that we have a name for it called common time. What that means is there are 4 quarter notes in a measure. So there's 4 quarters, and that makes up one measure. So here's one measure. There's 4 quarters. So that's a pretty nifty thing that we have going on there. And that's what you'll probably be working with the most. The other very, very common one is 3/4, which is there are 3 quarter notes in a measure. Now here they give you eighth note subdivisions. So they give you half of a quarter note. So these two is 1/4. It's a little weird. I don't know why they do it this way. And honestly, if you really want to understand this, I recommend you watch the other music theory series I'm going through, because it's just time signature makes way more sense. Now you might be saying, why would I want to, switch between these two? Why would I want to have 4 quarter notes in a measure? Why would I ever want to change that? Why would I ever want like 5? Because this top number, that's how many beats are in a measure. So if you have like 72 over 4, that means there's 72 quarter notes in a measure, versus like 3/4, there's 3 quarter notes in a measure. So 3/4 of a measure. Now, if you were to take it, that's why it's not that intuitive, is because we've been working off ratios. This is where the piano roll and music theory have sort of bridged and made this weird sort of hybrid thing that makes it much more difficult to understand for anyone who's not classically trained. So if we were to change this to like 4/8, that means that we have 4 beats in a measure, but it means that an eighth of the measure gets the beat. So there's going to be 4 eighth notes is what we will call them. There's going to be 4 eighth notes in one measure. So there'll be 4 of these little guys, and so if this was 4/8, it would be like this. But it's really weird how this grid interprets the setting and all this stuff. So I'm not a big fan of Pro Tools piano roll in the least, but it allows me to do this, and I have a whole bunch of other rulers that you could do crazy cool stuff with as well. But anyways, there's that. Now, let's say you do want to move between meters. In Pro Tools, you can just click this little plus button, and you can add a meter. And you can see I can make 2 beats in a measure while a quarter note gets the beat, and I can even say what the click gets. And as you see here, they've made a bridge between written music and this can actually generate sheet music. So these are all things that are very valuable tools to classical musicians. Most of you guys probably working at 4/4, but you may occasionally write a waltz, in which case FL may be sufficient to write in 3/4 if you go to the settings and you just change, where is it? Project. You just change it to 3/4 and you are good to go. 3 quarter notes and a measure. So 3 quarters. So there's a quarter, there's a quarter, there's a quarter, and one measure, which is weird because a quarter insinuates that there's 4, but in 3/4, there's only 3, and that's a whole measure. So it's kind of this weird deal. Again, I recommend watching the other video. Now, something that, let's say you do want to do that. Well, what you can do, at least in FL, in Pro Tools, they let you just write out they just let you change meter, and you can do that. And now the grid lines are a little weird because they subdivide those quarters. They put little bar lines representing 8 steps, but there are 8 eighth notes. So there are, 6? There's 6 eighth notes and 1 3/4 measure. And guess how many steps there are? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so this works out just fine. 4, 5, 6. So if we were to come over here, though, we can't go 3, 4, 4, 4, 3, 4. So what do? Well, you could change the number of, you could do a number of things. One of them is you could just ignore the grid, and you could just work about it that way. Another one is you can just change the pattern. So you could write out your pattern, and then you could just lengthen it to 3/4, and then just put it in there and just completely ignore the grid, the playlist. So there are different ways. There's a couple other ways that people suggest online. One of them is to change the bar beat to 1/4, and then essentially you can now write it as if 3/4, 4/4, 3/4, and do all that kind of jazz if you need to do something with moving time signatures. But the argument that they are not usually necessary is true for the beginner, but for the more advanced compositioner, is that's just a bad argument. That's not true. So if you have any questions, let me know. I know this is a confusing topic, so go watch the other series. I encourage everyone taking the series to learn to do the other one as well, and to learn written music, because that's just going to make a lot of this a lot easier, and you'll get a lot of refreshers, and you'll get multiple views on how to look at this. Subscribe and have a blessed day. Hey, Composer Gloves here. This is the first video in how to make a song in FL Studio 12. Assumably your first song. Perhaps you just downloaded the demo or gone about some other means of obtaining FL, hopefully by purchasing it. And you are now looking to create some sort of song.